Manny Cruz, the toony Irish tenor. I mean, there
That's
are
it.
Irish tenors. I mean, hey, there you go.
There you go.
I'm the Irish tenor by way of the Caribbean.
Hello and welcome to another Looney Tunes review video. If you are new to the channel, make sure you subscribe to follow my journey to review all 1000 classic Looney Tunes shorts and give this video a like as well. So this is a review for The Wearing of the Grin, and with me today is, he calls himself Mr. Irish, so say top of the morning to you to my good friend Manny Cruz, the Toonie tenor. Say top of the morning to you. I gotta practice
Top
that.
of the morning to ya. That's Manny Cruz. Let's see. What makes me Irish? Green is my second favorite color, and my birthday is March 10th, which is a week from today as of recording, and my birthday is a week before St. Patrick's Day. And I've always was jealous of people. Oh, my birthday's near Easter. My birthday's near Christmas. My birthday's near Halloween. I'm like, St. Patrick's Day. Potatoes are good. Corned beef, it's all right. I don't drink beer. I am 100% Hispanic, so there is nothing Irish about me.
Except for the
So,
fact you live closer to Ireland than me, so you got that going for you too.
okay,
So there you go.
okay, yeah, I
So
guess,
there you go.
and
Yeah,
I
so
like
that's what.
green, so why not?
There we go. I'm going to call you Mr. Ireland.
Manny
So there you go.
Cruz.
Manny
Manny
Cruz.
Manny Cruz.
Manny Cruz. That's it. All right. So as mentioned, this is The Wearing of the Grin, released on the 14th of July, 1951. It had a blue ribbon reissue sometime in 1961. It's the 625th in the series, and it's directed by Chuck Jones. You can find this on the Looney Tunes Golden Collection Volume 1 DVD set. There is a HD version out there, and yeah, hopefully this will get released on some sort of Blu-ray set at some point. And if you haven't seen this short, it is under copyright, so I can't show you the full thing here, but it's actually very, very basic. It's basically Porky trying to reach Dublin. He's about 12 miles away, goes to a castle, he's warned of leprechauns, and yeah, he ends up discovering that these caretakers are really leprechauns, and they think Porky's trying to steal their gold, and he's punished with the green shoes. Those wonderful green shoes, which I know Manny wears all the time. He's wearing them right now. He's doing a jig as we're talking right now.
How did you know?
A few bits of trivia to get underway. So I'll just point out that John T. Smith does one of the leprechauns, Seamus, that you first see in the beginning. And yeah, as I mentioned before, look, John T. Smith does quite a few Chuck Jones shorts around this time, but he pretty much is like, he's here today, gone tomorrow. So yeah, it's just incredible. Such a talented guy, and yet we barely know a thing about him. So yeah, this short is actually important for a reason that most people may not be aware of, and that this is actually the very last solo starring Porky Pig short of the Golden Age. And from here on, Porky would typically play straight man to Daffy Duck, or he might be in a short with someone like, say, Sylvester or whatever, but he won't be by himself like he is in this particular short. And it's interesting to see Porky's journey because, he starts off as this major, superstar. He was Warner Brothers' big breakout character after suffering from, Buddy and then Beans, of the Boston Beans. But anyway, just a shudder at that. But then, yeah, Porky was the breakout star, but then not long after, we had the wonderfully wacky Daffy Duck, who became a bigger breakout star, and then bigger still, Bugs Bunny. And then you notice that Porky was, I guess, used less and less in a starring capacity, because, let's face it, his personality, at least around the times of his solo shorts earlier on, weren't exactly the most exciting. It's equal to what happened with Mickey Mouse. When Mickey Mouse first came out, he didn't really have much of a personality. And later on, once Donald Duck came into the things and then Goofy, yeah, Mickey Mouse became basically the straight man, and he was in the background, and they made less and less shorts starring Mickey Mouse. So they both had a very similar trajectory. Although you might beg to differ about me thinking that the early Porky shorts sometimes weren't exactly exciting, right?
Yeah, I'm biased. Porky is my favorite Looney Tune character, and happy belated birthday. This is we're recording this the day after Porky's 80th birthday. I mean, yeah, after rewatching, some of the Clampett shorts, especially when you get to the point where Clampett's realizing, yeah, I can't really do much with Porky. I'll let these other one-shot characters or Daffy pull the weight of the cartoon. But one crucial thing about him is that despite the complaints of some of the directors, especially Frank Tashlin, because I remember reading Tashlin hated Porky, is that he found a new life as a sidekick. Cartoons like Drip Along Daffy and Duck Dodgers. And Porky works incredibly well as the straight man in those cartoons. And even some of the shorts where he's antagonistic, like the Charlie Dog cartoons. Chuck Jones did a lot of great work in revamping Porky's personality. And fortunately, he didn't fall to the wayside. Where with Mickey Mouse, he's bland. Yeah, you could argue his shorts from the 20s before he became such a huge Hollywood success, and then Walt Disney had to pull in the reins. I mean, if you ask people what's your favorite Mickey Mouse cartoon, they'll just stare at you. Whereas with Porky, as well as with all the Looney Tune characters, they have specific moments you can remember. Yeah, obviously Bugs has a ton of cartoons you can recall, and Daffy's one, and Porky not so much because the majority of his cartoons are from the mid to late 30s. Porky still to this day is in one of the most iconic moments in Warner Brothers history, is the fact that he ended the shorts from the 30s into the mid to late 40s with the That's All Folks popping out of the drum thing. It's a shame that, this is, like you said, the final solo Porky short. I wish he couldn't have been in more, but yeah, by this time, he was already overshadowed, especially by Bugs, Daffy. Sylvester and Tweety were catching fire. Fogmore was getting big. Porky gets a respect that, hardcore Looney Tune fans recognize the impact that he has on the studio. Whereas, the casual fans like, I want to see Tweety and I want to see Tav. Yeah, they were in good cartoons, but, again, us hardcore nerds know the difference.
Yeah, as for Porky, look, let's have a chat about this particular short, because this one seems to be one of those quote-unquote overplayed shorts, but with good reason. It's pretty funny short.
They were hamming it up, that's why.
Oh, oh, beautiful. I'll give you the chef's kiss for that one. They were hamming it up, yes.
I'm just bringing home the bacon at this point.
Now, I mean, when the cartoon opens up, you can see why Malcolm Maltese was so good. You get that opening sign about there being 12 miles to Dublin, and, right away, you know exactly the issues that Porky's having. It's bucketing down rain, and Porky needs a place to stay. But yeah, that wonderful sign is just what a way to open the cartoon. That I think is fantastic, and the backgrounds just showing the wonderful old castle in the background. I mean,
they were marvelous, darling. They were gorgeous. They were gorgeous. I mean, just a testament to just the hot streak that Jones's unit was in from, you could say, the late 40s up until the late 50s. Just not only in terms of the comedy and the writing, but the animation, the background's just chef's kiss.
Again, we keep on pointing this out in every single short, but my goodness, okay, we've just mentioned John T. Smith, but of course, Mel Blanc can do his own little Irish brook himself. The highlight for me, I don't know if this is something you noticed too, but when he does the whole like he does that.
That's I've been doing that. I do that actually laugh to imitate my oldest brother. Like sometimes I make fun of the way he smiles. And when I was a little kid, I used to go like something like that. And I'm thinking, I never saw this cartoon as a kid to my recollection. Did I pick that up from there? Where did I pick that up from?
And of course, the animation here is fantastic. And as we know about Chuck Jones, he was perhaps a lot more closely involved with the animation versus the other directors. And I think it's even been said like every 12th or so drawing is pretty much Chuck's drawing. And look at the animation of how Porky, when he's being shocked at the leprechaun, looking for his other half. Just the shock in his face. My goodness. It's so good. So good. I mean, any animated moments stood out for you?
The whole when Porky freezes, when he makes that pucked lips and everything. Jones was great at having those expressions, and he'll hold it. He'll just let it linger there for a second or two. And that's all you need to know. And it tells you just the absolute fear that he's feeling at that moment.
We got to point out the whole crazy scene at the end after Porky gets his green shoes. It just reminds me of the whole number one dog sequence in a previous Jones short, and of course the Hubie Boo short where the hypochondry cat, when he's just having that nightmare about being, operated on and all that. And Jones just seems to love doing that sort of stuff.
These guys must have quite the imaginations back in the 50s. For me, I said this in another commentary. I think it was Paying the Piper. This reminds me a lot of the Porky Jam, this music video that they had on Cartoon Network in the late 90s, 2000s. And it featured parts of this scene when Porky removes the green shoes and he starts wiping his forehead. And when he starts going down that loop and everything, I could instantly think of this cartoon, or I instantly think of that music music video every time I think of this cartoon because it uses mainly that, uses Payne the Piper, and there's a few other Porky shorts, but this one is prominently featured in that music video.
One thing, and this is why I wanted to get you on this one, not just because of the fact that you're a big Porky Pig fan, but you'll actually notice in the credits that you're not going to see the name Carl Starling. Who do we see in the credits there, Manny?
I'm pretty sure this is how you say his name, but it's Eugene Podeny.
So with Eugene Podeny, and I'm going to say Podeny, I'm going to say it that way, and I probably butchered that, but you might have seen his name before if you're familiar with Chuck Jones's MGM output later on, so his Tom and Jerry's and Dot and Line, that sort of thing. With me personally, when I hear this score, I'm listening very closely and I can hear some elements that he'll bring over. I'm not a musician, but I could hear certain things, certain sounds, if you will, that would be brought over to MGM later on. But you're the expert, Manny. What is it you can tell us about the music in this one?
Oh, I'm not a doctor. It's just it popped in my head. It says, "Oh, I'm not a musician. Oh, I'm not a doctor." So with I would say, well, doing a little more research, and I have to shout out in particular, I'm probably saying it wrong, but the Tralfaz blog by Don Yaup, excellent blog for Warner Brothers, for Hanna-Barbera, anything like that. But he actually wrote one of his blog posts about Eugene Podeny, and probably butchering his name again. Go ahead, nerds, go nuts. And like you said, he did the work for the MGM cartoons, Chuck Jones in the 60s. And how could we forget that he was the composer of How the Grinch Stole Christmas, the absolute classic work by Chuck Jones in was it 1966. But when it comes to the way that he's scoring this cartoon, and I was trying to focus in on the music in this particular listen to, and yes, Eugene was quoting pieces of music in this cartoon similar to what Carl Stalling and what Milt Franklin would later do. For example, you hear the Irish washerwoman, the wearing of the green, come back to Aaron, Gary Owen, and that's an Irish lullaby. So those are the pieces that you hear. But with the way that I hear Carl Stalling's scores, his is more dynamic, more hectic. It's more, I don't want to say stop and start. It changes more rapidly. It goes from one cue to the other. The tempi changes a lot. The dynamics fluctuate a lot. Whereas Eugene's score was more, I would say, more fluid, more. It wasn't as bombastic as a typical Carl Stalling score would be. Just a little information about Eugene Podeny himself. So he was born December 30th, 1919. He was born in northern China, actually. His parents, his father was from, I believe now, the Czech Republic, and he made musical instruments, and then he became a prop maker in Hollywood. His family arrived to the United States in August of 1923, where they eventually settled in California. And with Eugene, he started working at Warner Brothers, and I forgot all about this, but he was pretty much the third in the chain of command when it came to the Warner Brothers cartoon music, because you had Carl Stalling, who was the arranger of the cartoons themselves from 1936 to 1958. So he wrote the scores, he pulled the pieces of popular music from the Warner Brothers library, he quoted opera, he quoted jazz, he did all that, and he wrote the score himself. So he sat there, he plunked it out on a piano. Then he would pass it along to Milt Franklin, who started around the same time in 1936 as Carl Stalling. And Milt Franklin would become the orchestrator. And what's interesting in this cartoon, and not many cartoons do this, in the credits, they specifically state Milt Franklin did the orchestration. So the orchestrator takes the arrangement from Carl Stalling, and he's the one that said, this is the part where, in this part of the cartoon, I'm going to have the clarinet play this part. I'm going to have the violins do this. I'm going to have the cello do this. And then it was passed along to Eugene, and he was a copyist. Now, for my non-music friends, a copyist is a person who takes the sheet music that's written by an arranger or an orchestrator and writes it in a legible way for the musicians to understand. Because if you've had the chance to see some scores or compositions written by hand, it's just like someone's handwriting. You could barely read it. You know, I've seen some of the scores that Carl Stalling composed, and even I struggle seeing them. But the copyist, like I said, takes all the information and writes it out in a way for the Warner Brothers Orchestra to be able to read. And now it's a lot easier because, you know, with technology like Finale and Sibelius music writing programs. So when Eugene had to step in, and he stepped in for Carl Stalling, he did the score for several cartoons. He did Room and Bird, French Rarebit, The Wearing of the Grin, Leghorn Swoggled, and Lovelorn Leghorn. And he was filling in for Carl Stalling, who was recovering from surgery around that time in 1950. He was already familiar with some of the characteristics of how Carl Stalling did. And I think that's why on first listen, people, unless you have a really strong musical ear, that you won't really notice the difference in the scores, because even though Eugene Podany had a different style from Carl Stalling, he still incorporated some similarities because he was already working for him. And plus, they had the same orchestrator. So Milt Franklin already knew what to do. He already had his way of doing things. And that's what keeps it as organic as possible. It's not like later in 50s when they had a few cartoons that were done by John Seeley, or especially when you get to the 60s with Bill Lava's work, where
Oh,
it's
yeah.
it's
Bill Lovell.
so different. I have a sad part to this story for Eugene. He also wrote stuff for children's records. He did stuff for some Woody Woodpecker records. He did some stuff for Jerry Lewis. But sadly, Eugene did struggle with mental illness. And I'm going to try not to make this into a long PSA, but please, if something's troubling yourself, and I'm being very serious at this moment, please seek help. There are resources available. Take care of yourself and others. His life came to a very tragic end. And this is coming from the Los Angeles Times. Again, this is coming from Don Yaup's blog. The Los Angeles Times reported March 11th, 1984, and I quote, "A retired surgeon was shot and seriously wounded Saturday by a family friend who then shot and killed himself after the doctor went to the gunman's Silver Lake home to calm him," police reported. Paul Greergarief, 67, was in critical condition after surgery at Queen of Angels Hospital for multiple gunshot wounds. His assailant, Eugene Podany, 64, was found dead apparently of self-inflicted gunshot wounds in his apartment, unquote. He had some emotional problems. They were trying to calm him down, and the doctor, he survived. But it's a shame because, yeah, he did some Warner Brothers cartoons and the Tom and Jerry ones, which, eh. But I mean, How the Grinch Stole Christmas is an absolute classic. It is one of the
Exactly right.
greatest things ever made in animation, and he contributed the beautiful music in that cartoon. It's a shame that he had to meet such a tragic end. And again, I'll say it again, please find resources, talk to someone, help yourself
Exactly.
out.
And so now, before we go on to the rating, my good friend Luke Perkins wanted to add his thoughts on this short. So take it away, Luke.
Okay, this is going to be very short because I'm recording this at night and I have to go to school the next day. So I won't be able to talk about the cartoon the way I would love to. But I'm definitely going to talk about the highlight of the cartoon, which is the nightmare sequence. The nightmare sequence where Porky is going through this empty Dolly-esque landscape while trying to escape the leprechaun's magical dancing shoes is the highlight of the short for me. What I love in that sequence isn't really just the fact that it's a nightmare, but in particular, it's the staging and how it takes advantage of a rather absurd concept and makes it genuinely terrifying in some parts. Well, terrifying from Porky's point of view, at least. While I do know that the cartoon pulls the "it was a dream," or was it trope in the end, I'm still calling it a nightmare because the way the whole cartoon is sort of played, and in terms of staging and light, it almost plays like a nightmare. Even the colors are a little more muted and dark to add to the nightmarish side of the short, and even when we get to the climax, it doesn't go all out with the colors. It's consistent, but it's a little bit brighter, which I admire. I also need to bring a bit more credit to Eugene Podany's score, which also needs a mention here. What I love about his score is that, aside of using the Irish washerwoman, which is a common theme cartoons love to use for representing the Irish, I even remember hearing it in Oliver Wallace's score of the 1954 Disney short Pigs' Pigs, which mostly has Irish characters as well. Eugene's score is mostly original, and it works very well, but he does a great job making great use of the Irish washerwoman for the short. It can go from whimsical and cheerful to sometimes quiet, and in the case of the nightmare sequence, genuinely intense and frightening. And his score throughout the short is fantastic. Oh, by the way, one extra thing I wanted to point out was the final shot where a three-leaf clover irises out the cartoon and the whole background becomes green. For some reason, after the whole background turns green, it just cuts to black. Now, I was watching this, and maybe you guys were, from a Blue Ribbon reissue, in which that happens. I always wondered if the original ending titles had the background go green, then it would fade into the rings at the end of the titles. Unless something pops up, we'll never know. And I know it's stupid to bring that up because, well, Blue ribbons right now are sort of pointless because the credits are now still intact, but I wanted to bring this up because it always stood out to me upon first viewing. Well, that's all for now. Hope you're wearing green for this. I know I'm not. Bitch! Ouch!
So just to give this a rating, the cartoon itself, it's not a go-to cartoon, but it's so well made, I'm thinking an 8.5 out of 10 is about right for me. Again, it's a great cartoon, but it's not a go-to short for me. I mean, how would you rate this one?
I've seen this one multiple times. Like I said, I tend to play this one a lot during St. Patrick's Day, which is 2 weeks from today. Yeah, 8 out of 10 sounds about right. Some really cool animation. I do enjoy the music. I like the voice work, especially the. This was a nice send off to the Porky's solo work. Porky's still going to be doing great things. I mean, you got, like I said, Drip Along Daffy and Duck Dodgers coming up down the pike, so he's going to still do excellent work.
Exactly. But we'll wrap it up there. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and until next time, top of the morning.
And beware of the leprechauns. That's Manny Cruz saying good night.
I'm late for an appointment. We'll be with my psychiatrist.